Too bad. I really thought Navarro was gonna make it.
And forward this to Coruscant. Request permission to intercede.
They haven't returned a dispatch in weeks. They're swamped. They'll never get an answer in time.
It's been a hell of a week for cameos like this, and whilst the Bad Batch likely have a shelf life to their inclusion of Commander Krennic right now, and a more succinct reason for his involvement, as their style of storytelling is designed to be more concise, the Mandalorian has already been confirmed to have no end goal as of this season.
Fan-fucking-dabby-dozy.
I live for moments like these where you start to see that line between animation and live action blur, and characters like Zeb look just as animated in reality as they do in their original form, but it's visible and practical from his facial hair to his wide-eyed grin and the voice. Oh, the voice. Steve Blum, I've never been more happier to hear you come back, dude. I get there's a story to this episode, and I'll get there, but can we just admire the fact that we have a Rebels character in live action that isn't Chopper? There's about to be a reckoning for those that have refused to engage with the animated series of Rebels, where the future of The Mandalorian is seemingly starting to incorporate these characters in this part of the timeline and at random points as seen here as well. I'm just saying, don't come crying to those that have watched these shows and have the necessary context when you don't understand who your shiny-headed hero is talking to this time.
Got it!
We're on the road to Ahsoka at this point, which is set to follow on from the final moments of the animated treasure, in which we'll see Ahsoka and Sabine Wren searching for Ezra Bridger and will likely come up against Grand Admiral Thrawn in his resurgence to relevance again. Not aware of any of those names? Don't worry, I think you'll find out soon enough. Anyway, I'll get back to this in a bit, but for now though, I guess there's an actual episode to talk about, so let's get into it. The premise of this week's episode is rather simple, to be honest. Grief Karga's insistence on remaining independent comes back to bite him in the ass when Pirate King Gorian Shah returns to deliver his own justice and reclaim Navarro because of reasons.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Anyway, after being purged from the city, Grief gets in contact with Carson Teva, who goes to the New Republic for support but is turned away thanks to Elia Kane, and instead calls upon Mando and the Creed for aid in this matter. A little chit-chat and a Lothcat later, and they come to a consensus on the matter by choosing to aid Karga, with Bo and Din leading the charge.
Cool.
We get a pretty little battle sequence full of Mandalorian badassery that ends with Grief delivering on the promise of giving Mando that plot of land from Chapter 17, but expands it to give all of the Creed a new home. They accept, and the armourer declares Bo as the one that walks between, allowing her to remove her helmet as and when she chooses, and believes her to be the best chance of unifying all the lost tribes of Mandalore. Then we close on Carson Teva doing some digging and discovers a shot-up shuttle in space that once housed Moff Gideon, but instead now bears floating corpses and remnants of Beskar alloy. Now, given how dramatically intense this week's conclusion to the Bad Batch was, this was a helpful little watch to lift my spirits back up with an easygoing, less labour-intensive viewing experience that just allows you to kick back and take in what you're seeing with the option of thinking further into it if you want to. I must admit that this series has still fallen short to the Bad Batch one last time for its final week on our screens, but thankfully with that out of the way now, I hope this series can start to find its stride again and deliver some fascinating content to fill that void for me as we round out this season as well. It's not that this season has been terrible, but compared to just last season alone, it has fallen short of what I feel we've come to expect from Disney Star Wars' saviour for the longest of times. I can honestly say, hand on heart, I loved Episode 3, and last week was a decent enough inclusion, but everything has felt pretty run-of-the-mill in retrospect, and that's not how I want this to feel. Hopefully now that we're edging closer to the end of the season with just 3 weeks left, we'll start to see things pick up, especially following this incredible cameo and the inclusion of Gideon's ship being left in the wind. A plot piece of which I feel was rather tacked on in this installment, but it chases up on that talking point from both Chapter 17 and 19 that mentioned Gideon never made it to trial, and that there were rumours that he'd gone missing. I would be interested to get some more of the villainous content in this season, as we've seen things from both Din, Bo, Pershing and now Teva's perspectives, so to really dig into a character like Gideon to establish his part in all this, in my mind at least, is the next logical step forward for this series and the running narrative that seems to be subtly focusing on the rumblings of the First Order. When you consider a lot of the talking points, even about the New Republic, come back to the Moff, then the random assortment of bombers over Kalevala, then everything with Kane and Pershing, to now this assault on Navarro that carries an independent element to it, but could potentially be a cover-up for some of Gideon or Thrawn's actions, everything just seems to be headed that way. To push the galaxy into a state of disarray again amidst the confusion within the New Republic that we saw in Chapter 9, and demonstrate how ineffectual they are, and how they're more concerned with procedures and protocols are causing them to become short-sighted, is a necessary thing that we need to witness, and this series seemingly wants to do, so we might as well just follow the wind on this one. Something as well that Teva hints at when digging into the reality of Kane's position within the New Republic, and how they were captured and brought in as a sign of respect for a prosperous new age. But even Mando scoffs at their societal role, and it's the unsteadiness of their operations that led to Karga wishing to remain independent initially, before Shard's involvement. A return of which I assumed would have happened back in my Chapter 17 review, but my feeling is now, as it was then, I don't care. Visually, he's rather goofy looking, particularly when you weigh him up against what they did with Zeb in this episode, but at least it's out of the way now. Shard and his men weren't compelling for me in the slightest, and just felt like a loose plot point we'd clear up, but not one that I thought would nearly dominate an entire episode. That said, they were great foils for the Mandalorians to take on in yet another battle that levels Navarro.
Good job.
Speaking of the Mandalorians, this was an excellent use of them, and we got some awesome developments for the Creed going forward, where they seem to be viewing Din as an equal now, and Paz is stepping up, but the respect that Bo has earned from her actions over Ragnar is the progression I mentioned her character needed back in Chapter 17. She's been in desperate need of a fulfilling arc from all the way back in Clone Wars, and this series should end in my mind with her taming the Mythosaur and claiming the throne of Mandalore. However, with her being considered a child to all now, that seems to be one of the strongest chances in uniting all of the tribes, and that fascinates me even more, and just proves that the character work they're doing with Bo is easily one of the best pieces of writing to come out of the series right now. I understand a lot of people are growing frustrated with the lack of pure Mando and Grogu content, but we're in an expanded universe of storytelling that is populated with all these different shows, games, movies, comics and books, where we'll eventually see crossovers from different genres, different characters, different times. And this concept has never been more evident than now with the inclusion of Zeb in this installment, and honestly, I'm not annoyed with this. It allows the show to expand more naturally, offers some credence to the animated shows and how they are relevant, and prevents it from stagnating like the first season of the show did for me. I'm clinging to this appearance now like a fucking lifeline, as I simply want more. I truly adore the Rebels series, and Zeb is one of my all-time favourite characters to come out from that, and his inclusion here could mean more for the series than we're aware of, but for now at least, I'm more curious about why he's back. When we wrapped up with Rebels following the Battle of Endor, and spoiler warning if you've not seen this, but Zeb returns to the planet Lyrasan, accompanied by former ISB agent Alexander Callis, who assumed he'd wiped out the Lasat people during the war, and Zeb wanted to prove to him that he didn't do that, and accepted him as part of their own. This was all incredibly sweet, but it was assumed in this moment that Zeb had put his days of being a warrior behind him and had become a guardian to his world, but it would appear not. He's now part of the New Republic, and most likely alongside Hera and Chopper, who continued as members of the New Republic post-Return of the Jedi. However, Zeb was one of the biggest wildcards when we saw that Sabine headed off with Ahsoka in search of Ezra, and sadly Kanan had passed about 6 years before, so my question is, why is he back? I would hope it's for more holistic purposes like clearing up the remnants of the Empire, but my head keeps nudging at the possibility that maybe he knows something about Thrawn or Ezra, and maybe return to the military to help Hera and the others, with Sabine possibly cluing him in that Ezra is still out there. Who knows? This is just my addition to Speculation Station, but either way, as a long-time Rebels fan and animated enthusiast, it's great to see him come home, and I'm elated at the prospect of which member of the Ghost we'll see see next. Characters aside, this was an enjoyable episode with some impressive visuals, decent acting, and realistic animation that has proven to become some of the best of the series. That's all from me, however. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like this one, hit the like, subscribe to keep up to date with all of my uploads, and until next time everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.